Hey, thank you for joining the show. But before we get started, I neglected to mention something during the show that I really want you guys to be able to take part in. The Table War team has put together for us a code to use in the month of May, which is IC May 2020. I will put that code in the show notes and in our Facebook group, Facebook page, and website. This code is good until May 31st and can be used to purchase any fat mat, geomat, or macro mat, and it'll give you a 10% off discount on any of those things. This is a great time to support small businesses like Table War. These guys have been incredibly generous to the community. They are a very small business, but have donated a ton of material to us to give out as prizes, but also last year when we did the Paradise Fire, they donated a ton of cases, mats, and everything. So if you could show them a little bit of love, again, you can get 10% off with the code ICMay2020, and I will put that show in the show note, or that link in the show notes. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 206. This is Carl.
This is Adon.
And this is Dave.
And Dave, thank you so much for joining us, man. Super appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. It's usually I come on to talk about different things like charity projects or Kickstarters and stuff. But I'm excited to chat for the whole episode.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I was very intimidated. I was going to be on a show with the Dave Taylor. I was like, oh my gosh.
I'm not the Dave Taylor. I'm a Dave Taylor.
I just know
there are many of us.
I was going to be on a show with my Adepticon drinking buddy.
Yeah. Man, if only I could have bought you a Long Island.
So listen, this show is sponsored by Rafael Cordero, who is one of our Patreon sponsors. Thank you so much, Rafael, for all your support. If you're interested in learning about our Patreon, you can find out more information about that at theindependentcharacters.com. That's independent without an A.
Yeah.
Independent.
Yeah. And you'd be surprised how many people spell that wrong.
I wouldn't.
No, you probably wouldn't. So this episode, we're going to be talking about the graying of Warhammer 40k. And Adon, why don't you give us kind of an idea of the concept here? Just a brief, we talk about it again later, but just a quick intro.
Well, the idea is that, if you have somebody who's been playing since Rogue Trader days, like Dave.
Yep. I'm an older man.
He's the youngest one here.
Came out in 1987, right? And so however old you were in 87, if you were 10 years old, right? You're 43 now. And so what does that mean to have a game that's 33 plus years old and you have a community that's also graying along with it, but by the same token, trying to stay alive by bringing in Youngblood?
Yeah.
So
I think it's a great topic idea, Don, and thanks for sharing it with us. So let's leap right into Elite Choice. These are things that we've seen in the ICs community or around the internet in the last 2 weeks or so. So for me, I chose Tim Spinelli and his fully painted Primaris Marines.
Quite a project.
Are just beautifully done. Like, absolutely, I am so... His color choice is great. Of
course you like the color choice.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic looking. But his execution on it is just fantastic. And I got to tell you, I mean, looking at this, I love Primaris Marines. Like, I'm not even joking. They are of a scale that I enjoy painting more than just your standard Marines. Like, they're more on the Terminator scale. And for some reason, like that Terminator really appeals to me. I enjoy painting those more than other Marines. And
so question about that army.
Yep.
The guys with the underslung long auto cannons.
Yeah.
They're normally on those little jump stands.
Yeah.
He has them earthbound.
Yeah.
So should he have like a little aerial or something that...
No.
So is that modeling for advantage?
How is it? He can't see the opponent either.
Right, but the opponent can't see them to shoot them.
But he can't see the opponent.
Yeah.
He needs to be able to see the opponent to get shot back. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, I don't care. I personally don't like the stands. Like Tim,
Right,
you want to come
right.
over here and play in the Astronaut Con? Bring these guys over. I don't care.
No, it's just a question that always comes up. I think they look great on the ground.
I personally do not see that as modeling for advantage.
Okay.
They can't shoot if they can't be seen to shoot. So I don't see it as an issue.
All right.
What would you pick, Adon?
So this is always so hard for me because I always want to do something like, Eric Ackerman's vertical diorama that was really kind of creepy, or Jeremiah Moore talking about his significant other doing a collage of 40k stuff.
Adon, did you? I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Did you listen to our last episode where we had the Patreon guests on?
Yes.
It was so fun to hear them go, I don't know how I could just pick one.
Right, exactly. It's hard.
It's hard.
It's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, for sure.
What I ended up picking was Dave Moss, and he had something he called his cheap and nasty paint and conversion job of these Beastmen guys. And what caught my eye, is the way he used the cotton or whatever it is, as kind of the muzzle flashes and things. Uh-huh. And when I first was looking at these pictures, I was like, are there lights in those things? I mean, it really does kind of jump out at you. And I just thought it was a really cool take on that army.
I think they look great.
They've got a little banner that says "Men, not beasts."
Yeah.
Trying to, we're not animals. Yeah, you're kind of animals.
Yeah.
But that was my choice.
I think it's fantastic. And Dave,
they look great.
This is an interesting one that you chose here.
Yeah.
I think I scrolled through the Independent Characters community Facebook page and just wanted to see something that made me go back and look.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I do too.
Yeah. To be honest, it was like just had a twinge of jealousy when I saw Tony Palmer's gaming table.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Gaming room, and I was like, everything is so neat and tidy.
Yeah.
I could never, my brain just wouldn't allow me to have that neat and tidy, but no matter how much I desire it. But yeah, is putting the Kallax, the IKEA Kallax cabinets together, and putting a tabletop on top of them. It's like, man, I could do that.
Yeah, super easy
in my house. But Eddie has done it with a beautiful wood. And I'm guessing he's Australian as well because he said Tassie oak. Oak from Tasmania.
Yeah.
So there, fellow Aussie. But yeah, it was just it was simple and straightforward.
Yeah.
But it just looked so fantastic.
It totally did. It
was like I would love to game there.
A lot of times we get questions about, well, how do I find these things you talked about? What I'll tell you is you can go onto the Independent Characters Facebook group and you can search under the hashtag Elite Choice, and that will pull up all of the Elite Choices we have made over a given period of time.
I marked mine.
Yeah. So by all means, go take a look. And Dave, you probably didn't add that, but I will add that to Tony Palmer's game table. Yeah,
that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, because it was a perfect example of how you can get a game table that's fantastic for what you want to do at a very affordable price. So and it looks amazing. So
yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
Well, I think we just launch right into the show. You guys got anything you want to add before we get started?
Let's go.
All right.
Yeah.
I gotta go take some Geritol first. So.
All right.
I gotta get to bed in half an hour. Come on.
I gotta go yell at these kids, tell them to get off my lawn. We'll be right back.
Matt here to welcome you into 2020 and tell you about an amazing new offer from Table War. All returning customers receive an extra 10% off Table War's US web store. Need a tower case? 10% off. Need a new fat mat? 10% off. Need a macro mat, geomat, or just some accessories? All 10% off. This offer starts January 1st and will continue on throughout 2020. No coupon required. Just ensure you have an account and this discount is automatic. This is our way of saying thank you to all of our loyal customers. So visit us today at tablewar.com. Table War. Table War is a registered trademark of Table War Designs, Inc., all rights reserved.
All right, so let's kick it off with a little bit of hobby progress. And Adon, in looking at your notes, I think you should go first, sir.
All righty. I have a whole section of New Year, New Army 2020, but since it's a completely different game system that we don't talk about here.
We're talking about all kinds of game systems right now because Nobody can go out and play with each other at the moment.
I know, right?
So give me whatever you got.
No, I'm working on a lot of Age of Sigmar stuff
in
terms of hobby stuff and painting and assembling and things like that. And I won't go too heavily into it, but my new army for 2020 in Age of Sigmar is Seraphon.
Yeah.
So I'm working on those, and I'm working on a special little army project for one of the Lords and Heroes episodes. So doing a bunch of stuff with that, but doing some Zoom and Google Hangout hobby sessions.
Yeah.
Really, I find that they're motivating because I find that I don't paint very much on my own unless there's somebody else there or there's an event kicking me in the butt or something like that. So so those have been really helpful. Painting with Justin and some other folks online, Dan, Osborne and stuff like that. I bought 2 storage tanks. They're called, the package is called a storage tank. 2 storage tanks and a control tower from Lasercraft Miniatures. Mm-hmm. They're MDF laser cut stuff.
Yeah.
And I modified one of the storage tanks, kind of cut a little bit out of the base and so it would fit on top of the other storage tank. We ended up with a double height unit.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then it had these little railings that are supposed to go around each level. And so one of the levels in between the 2 towers was smaller because it was the top of the first tower.
Yeah.
And I put the railings kind of flat instead of upright. So it actually made that level almost exact same diameter as the other levels.
Okay.
And then the control tower piece, I was just going to put the control tower on top of that double height thing.
Yeah.
But the differences in the towers construction looked weird. Like one was an octagon, the other was a hexagon. So I just used the control room, the top of the control tower, on top of that double height thing.
This is all for your spaceport port.
For the spaceport, yeah. So the spaceport that and I don't think I've talked about it on this show, but well, no, I mean the current layout.
Yeah.
I got the inspiration from the Siege of Terra series.
Yeah.
And the Lionsport spaceport. So Lionsgate spaceport.
Lionsgate, yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to have this really tall control tower. So I built that, and then I wanted, the way I had kind of cobbled the 2 things together, I was short some pieces to kind of close it all in. And I emailed Mark at Lasercraft Miniatures. I said, hey, I'd really like to be able to get just these little pieces. I don't need a whole nother set. And he was like, yeah, I'll send it to you. So, okay, well, just let me know, how much I owe you or whatever. He goes, no, that's cool. Just keep sending me pictures of stuff.
That was really nice.
And anywhere you post it, just let me know you posted it.
That's really nice.
So that was really cool. I mean, it's, it wasn't a lot of pieces, but it was still really cool for him to just kind of send it out.
Well, I'll include his link in the show notes too.
So, yeah, pretty cool. So, and then, I did a sample of the table layout, identified some of the other kits I wanted to get, but they're on COVID shutdown, so I wasn't able to order them. There's one that's kind of like a double, it's almost like a double landing pad. Mm-hmm, it's a small double landing pad where something about the size of a Storm Raven or what's the smallest one? Storm Talon. Mm-hmm. That Storm Talons would fit on. And so those are going to be on the kind of the edges of the spaceport, because one of the things that was really cool about in the story, it talks about how there's landing pads on every level.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was one thing I wanted to try and kind of mimic.
I gotta say, I saw the layout you did, like you'd posted pictures and stuff of what you were, and then you were building the tower and such. And I think it looks great. I dread working with MDF. Like I absolutely, I hate it.
Why is that?
I have had the most frustrating time with assembly of MDF pieces. Like, and again, when you come from assembling primarily like Games Workshop models that fit together, like, boop, there you go. That's how it goes together. Yeah. And then you move to something where it's like a little janky and I have to hold this perfectly straight while this sits here. And then I have to do, it feels like it just frustrates the heck out of me putting the stuff together.
Well, what I find is that obviously the different companies, there's different qualities about how they go together. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And to be fair, it could just be my experience with the company I have used and the pieces I was building. I found, and also to be fair, the instructions were not particularly good on the piece I was working. So maybe, I'm maybe taking a little bit of that and transferring it, and maybe I should give a different set a try. To be fair, what's been your experience with them, Dave?
I've done a lot with my buddy Alex at Ironheart Artisans.
Yeah.
Alex does really detailed and elaborate kits, and he and I have worked on designing things for his range for quite a long time. So it's almost at the point now where I can look at the pieces. He can send me a kit. I can look at the pieces and I'll know how it goes together.
Right. Which
piece goes in first.
Okay.
Because that's often with the really elaborate ones. If you don't put them in the right order, you'll have a problem with it.
That's where I was running into trouble.
You got to dry fit it too to make sure it's going to go together right.
Yeah, always a good idea.
No joke. Definitely. Like, all joking aside, Don. Yeah. I dry fit the heck out of those things.
Absolutely.
But one of my other favorites is Warsenal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jay at Warsenal does some spectacular design work.
Yeah, but that's pretty. It's very Infinity-esque. It's not very 40k-esque.
Yeah, I've taken a bunch of the Infinity style stuff and sort of wrecked it. Given it a 40k feel along the way. When you switch up the colors, a lot of it's when you switch up the color schemes, you can adjust some of that.
Is Ironheart Artisans are they frequently at Adepticon, and they have like there's one site that has like this massive metal kind of display stands, and they have everything assembled on them?
No. Alex is a much smaller operation, but he is regularly at Adepticon for sure.
Yeah, okay. And you would recognize the Warsenal booth when you saw it.
Okay.
For sure.
Oh, the Warsenal was, it's always huge.
That might be the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah. And so I did that, and then I had the layout, and then Dan from Tectonic Craft Studios, who's also an MDF guy.
Yeah.
I was talking to him about the different landing pads, and so he was going to work on doing a design for me so they would interlock together and stuff. So it's, I'm pretty happy that it's kind of coming along. It's something I can do without having to worry about, take the time in playing, and it allows me to procrastinate quite a bit from actually painting my lizards. So,
well, listen, I mean, I got to tell you, like Brian Harvey from Splintermine had painted up like an Eldar table, and he used a bunch of MDF stuff in combination with foam rocks and such he had made.
Right.
And man, his table looks so good. And that was what got me to buy these sets that I bought. And then I went through assembling them, and I got, this did not come out right, and I'm looking behind me, not to throw anybody under the bus, but my wife was helping me assemble these things, and she was like, I can assemble this. And I said, well, actually, I think you want to do this. I've got this. Spoiler alert, she didn't got it. So to be fair, my experience is probably not the best one, and I should probably give it another go.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So anyway, the table's looking cool.
Yeah, that's looking cool, and I wanted to leave enough space in between where you can actually get your hands in there, and the second level will be high enough that knights can walk through underneath the second level.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it's coming along. It's coming along. I'm pretty happy with it, and it's helping me, the procrastination piece. I've gotten so much done procrastinating painting. It's just amazing.
Well, you finish it, and then I'll come out there and play on it, because this thing will probably be over by about then.
There you go.
A couple years. Dave, what have you been working on, man?
Well, I know that, again, Don's pointed out that we're not allowed to talk about it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
You can't. He always says that, and I'm like, I used to be.
No, you've cut me off before saying
a long time ago.
Basically, beginning of February, started on a Slaves to Darkness army for Age of Sigmar. But the way that it kind of developed was that it was also, it's got a lot of Warcry stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
My gaming group and I were playing a bunch of Warcry last year.
Yep.
Beginning of this year, we decided to play some Saga Age of Magic. And I was like, well, I want to have a new force for it, but I don't want to paint a whole bunch of new stuff.
Yeah.
So in the end, of course, I bought an entire Slaves to Darkness army and have painted all of that.
With the new
as you do, yeah.
The new models, the new Slaves to Darkness models.
Yeah, the new I started with the Start Collecting set.
Yeah,
There's
so
a bunch
good.
of the Warcry stuff, like the Ogroid Myrmidon, the Firmoroid Crusher, the Mindstealer Spheranx, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Instead of doing, I wanted to do a unit of Marauders, and instead of
Right.
using the original ones, I got a whole bunch of the Blood Reavers.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're called Blood Reavers. Is that right? The
Yep.
guys from one of the earlier Khorne box sets, and converted them into sort of, I guess, undivided
Right.
Marauders.
Hey, so the Saga Age of Magic, does that use battle boards like the other sagas as well?
It does. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And
I
it
gotta
uses
check that out.
uses the same sort of format of you have 1 point, and 1 point is either 4 Hearthguard, 8 Warriors, or
Right.
12 Levy.
Right.
Depending on what your force is. But yeah, it's pretty neat.
Oh, cool.
So I've kind of finished that off. It's about 3,000 points.
Wow.
Is that
And originally I was thinking, this will take me I'll do this on and off over the next 6 months. And then it was like, hey, you've got a lot of extra time sitting at your desk. So I plowed into that. And
I hate you, Dave.
Don't hate me, please.
I love to hate you.
It's just what I do.
That's awesome.
But
I've seen a lot of people using those Khorne models. The what did you just call them?
The Blood Reavers.
Blood Reavers. I've seen a lot of people converting those to Khorne Berserkers as well, and doing some pretty cool stuff with that.
Or are they using the Blood Warriors?
Oh, I'm sorry, they're using the Blood
Blood
Warriors. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you're right. I've seen some of those. They look great.
They're ace. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you been watching any? I'm not sure if you have been watching any of the Games Workshop Warhammer community streams.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yep. Now they're doing all the hangout and hobby every day.
Yeah, the paint sessions. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been cool seeing a lot of the Khorne stuff that Wade's been doing.
Yeah, for sure.
And now he's getting onto those Flesh Terrors.
What a
So
surprise that Wade's doing Khorne.
Yeah. Complete surprise. I would never have seen that coming.
No.
But yeah. There was basically, as I was coming towards the end of the Slaves of the Darkness army, I was like, I want to do something else. And the thing that grabbed my attention as I was looking through, I can't remember even where it first hooked me, but the Chaos Knights.
Yeah.
40k Chaos Knights.
Yeah.
And it was like, I want to do something with these, but I've got a couple of Imperial Knights that I've got to finish off first.
Yeah.
So I put together and painted up a Castigator that I've had sitting around for a little while.
Yeah.
So I finished that off last night, I think. Put the final decals on and did some weathering and got that in the shelf. So I've got all my Imperial Knights there.
That Castigator is actually one of my favorite of the
It's a
Forge
great
World Knight
model,
models. It is absolutely one of my favorite.
It's a great model.
Yeah. That sword is awesome. I can't remember the name of the gun, but it's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it good in the game? Has anybody played with it?
It's good. It's good. I think if I remember correctly, the gun is I think it has 2 options, but I think the one I had it on mine was primarily anti-personnel. Like it's going to kill troops by the boatloads, but then the sword is pretty amazing against everything. So
yeah, I think it like doubles the number of attacks or something like that.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was nice. It's a kit that I wanted to finish off for a long time, so I'm glad that I finally got that done.
Yeah.
And so, how many knights do you actually have, Dave?
In the Imperial Knights, I have, if you include armigers, I've got 4 armigers. And so if you include them, I've got 15 Imperial Knights.
And are you primarily just assembling and painting them for the enjoyment of that, or are you actually playing with them?
It's really it's the enjoyment of assembling and painting. Is the big thing. I pretty much all of my stuff I assemble and paint as if I could play with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So if I don't have a purpose for it beyond the assembling and painting, I'm not really particularly interested in.
Gotcha. So
But
like you're not
time,
interested in making like dioramas.
Not anymore. I used to
sort
of be into that, but I kind of struggle sometimes as well. It's like, that's a really cool model. I'd love to paint that model.
Yeah.
But I need to build a purpose around it.
Right.
Beyond that. So
why not have 14 other ones to build a purpose for it?
Exactly. So now I can pick and choose whenever I'm not going to play a game. I've got options galore.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, I've kind of done nothing hobby wise. And I've said this before, but I mean, it's just been, everybody heard me talk. The promotion at work really put me in charge of making sure our entire IT department can function, and just as our whole company, 4,000 people, work remotely now,
right?
Things have.
That's quite an issue, especially for a security company.
Things have just been super busy.
To
the point where I get done in the evening and I'm just like, oh my god, I just need to turn off my brain for a bit. So I fortunately Caleb is painting up Shell's Night Lord's kill team, so he's going to ship that to us Monday, and then Shell and I will play some kill team. She's been really looking forward to that, and of course I
caught a sneak peak of him doing some airbrushing some lightning bolts.
Yeah, it looks so good. It looks so good. I'm kind of sickened because now I'm not going to be able to expand. I know what she's going to say is, oh well, I'd like a whole Night Lord's army. Oh, would you? Sounds like you're going to have to pay Caleb to.
Here's Caleb's phone number. Go for it.
Yeah, knock yourself out. He doesn't do commissions anymore, by the way. And I finished reading Saturnine, the fourth book in the Siege of Terra series by Dan Abnett, and boy, has not changed my opinion that the authors are at the top of their game in that series. And
I can't wait for that one.
Just incredible. Absolutely.
I think I did. I don't know if I already mentioned it, but I finished Talarn as well.
Yeah, that's the Horus Heresy.
Yeah.
Piece. John French wrote that, right?
I believe so. Yeah,
it's the tank battles.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, largest tank battle. Yeah, it's a great book. That's a great book. Have you read any of the Siege of Terra stuff yet?
Yeah. I got the first wall. I got the first couple. The Saturday is not out yet on Audible. So
right. Yeah, they're fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So, in terms of games played, there hasn't been much going on here either. But we have, been using Tabletop Simulator for various board games and that kind of stuff. Been playing some Eldritch Horror, that kind of thing. I'm running a Call of Cthulhu RPG right now for several friends. I'm playing in two separate D&D games. So RPGs are kind of making a comeback for me right now. And
it's so much better, easier to do remotely,
right? But it's kind of one of those things where it's been, the reason I got into 40k was because my RPG group, which we met every Sunday, was starting to kind of, I can't make it because I've got this or I've got that, and I was like, I need something I could do with just one other person. Now all of a sudden everybody's like, hey, we should play D&D. Oh, should we? Should we? So we have been, and I'm quite enjoying it. And my kid Tucker's playing in one of those games, so that's cool. And it's cool. It's cool to keep in touch with people and relaxing and that kind of thing. So we're having a good time there. Don, what have you been up to?
That's good.
Yeah, I was trying to follow up on an idea that Mike Montesa had, where he set up a board with two armies, and then had his friends actually be the players, and they would email him what the moves are, and he would move the models and take pictures and send them back.
The pandemic has hit, and we've gone back to play by mail, Dave.
Right. It's like play by mail. Exactly right. Exactly right. And so I thought, that'd be kind of cool to do with a 4x4 meeting engagements Age of Sigmar game.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to coax my buddies Rob and Alex to do that, and I took pictures of the board and I gave them the army list. It's okay, guys, what do you think? They haven't quite bitten yet, but I think it'd be kind of fun to do.
There were when I was a kid, I used to read a lot of comic books, Dragon Magazine as well, a bunch of that stuff, and there were all these play-by-mail games. And there were two in particular I remember to this day. One was I think it was called Hyborian Age, and it was based on Conan. And but you literally would have to mail in your moves and stuff. Snail mail. Yeah. There was no email at the time. Yeah. And the other one was Berserker. It was based on the novels. And I always looked at them and I was like, man, this sounds like something I would get into. And they're like, I'm not going to spend money on this. So I've never actually played a play-by-mail game like that.
Well, one of my old roommates ran a play-by-mail wrestling, professional wrestling RPG.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, the traditional
for my move, I put Adon in a headlock.
the traditional, lose your friend's Playboy mail game was diplomacy back in the day.
Oh,
right. Yep.
You do email diplomacy, and then you'd end up with no friends left after that because that game is so cutthroat.
What else have you been up to?
I refuse to play Catan with my family. That game.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan.
Uh-huh. Yeah, especially the somebody got some ore. I hate that part. The trying to beg for resource. I just don't like that. And then my son is actually DMing a D&D 5e game, and my other son and his wife and my son and his fiance are playing, and me, and so it's a family D&D game.
That's kind of cool.
So yeah, it's pretty cool. I was really surprised.
Can't get Kim into
that Jake's wife was willing to try it. She has never played before, so
those are the best players. Like that's the best time. Yep. I wish I could go back and not know stuff.
Yeah,
and play in an RPG.
Yeah. So that's been really fun watching her kind of discover the game.
Yeah,
it's been kind of cool.
Yeah,
and he's using Roll20.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Dave, what have you been up to? You've been isolated.
Well, I haven't played. So I mentioned my gaming group. We used to play every other Wednesday night. Wednesday night, Thursday night, something like that. It's been so long since we've played.
Some night that ends in day.
Yeah, exactly. But my daughters are. They love to. Occasionally, they'll go through these phases where they'll love to play some board games.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been playing a lot of Sushi Go Party, which is a very cool, fun, quick game. And we've been playing a game called The Climbers.
Never heard of it.
Which is it's a really kind of wild one where it's a whole bunch of wooden blocks. Basically, when you buy it, it's a box full of wooden blocks, and you stack everything up in the center, and then each of the blocks have like 6 different colors on each side, a color on each side.
Okay.
And you're playing your little meeple might be red or blue or green or whatever, and you've got to take a block. When it's your turn, you take a block and you stack it up, and you've got to climb up the stacks of blocks
by color,
by your own color. Okay. And people can take a block away, like to put it somewhere else, or they can put a block on top of the next block you want to go to, or that sort of thing. So it's a lot of blocking and maneuvering and trying to think a couple of steps ahead. And you've got to keep. So you build up this nice tall tower of wooden blocks to keep climbing up.
Got it.
So a couple of guys at Home Depot were like, "How can we get rid of all this scrap?" Oh, I know.
Pretty much. Yeah. They just wrapped the cardboard box around it and said, "Here you go." But it is a lot of fun. But one that we've been playing quite a bit over the last couple of months is a game called Incubation.
Okay.
I bought it as a bit of a giggle, like just after it was like, okay, well, kid's going to be off school for a couple of weeks. Okay, well, look at this Incubation. Let's play that. And it's not at all about viruses or anything like that, which is quite nice. It's actually about hatching dragon eggs.
Okay.
But it's one that the whole family can play. So my 8-year-old daughter can get in there and play, and she can develop a strategy of how she wants to try and win.
Nice.
And which is definitely good. She's doing all right. She usually comes second or third out of the 3 of us.
Nice.
But not too bad.
Yeah, I found we've also been playing like some simple games like that, and King of Tokyo, and this other one called Dice Throne, just with the family. Dice Throne's pretty awesome. Yeah. And they have that on Tabletop Simulator, by the way. That's a fantastic game on Tabletop Simulator. So we've been doing a bunch of that, and it's been nice spending time with the family and that kind of thing. But at this point, I'm ready to get out of the house for a while.
You ready to push some toy soldiers around?
Something. I'm really, really jonesing for that, and like I'm very excited that Caleb's, for out of the kindness of his heart, worked on this stuff for Shell, because we're really looking forward to Kill Team once it gets here. So
yeah,
that should be a lot of fun.
That will be good.
So let's do this. We're going to take a short break. Then we're going to come back and we're going to start talking about our main topic, the graying of Warhammer 40k. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, I'm Caleb.
And this is Kat.
And we are CK Studios. We want to invite you and your friends to come paint with us at one of our exciting and fun-filled airbrush and hobby weekenders. Our weekend workshops are 2 days of intense hands-on training, working directly with and learning from some of the top gaming artists in the industry.
Whether you're brand new to miniature painting or an experienced veteran that wants to up your game, CK Studios has the workshop for you. Our workshops cover everything from learning the basics and building confidence in airbrushing, all the way up to creating that centerpiece model for your army or display case.
For more class info and our upcoming schedule, you can find us on Facebook at CK Studios Come Paint With Us, or register directly at ckstudios.bigcartel.com.
If you can't find a class near you, that's okay. Just contact us and we'll bring a workshop to you.
And we're back, and we are now talking about our main feature this episode, the graying of Warhammer 40k. Don, this was kind of your concept from the get-go. You pitched it, and I thought this is a great idea. Why don't you give us kind of a summary of what we're talking about here?
Right. So the original idea came from me waking up really early in the morning and looking in the mirror.
I was going to say waking up and finding, how did I hurt my back sleeping?
No, I mean, just there's been conversations around, you know, I listen to people talk about, oh, this was so great in second edition. And then on the other hand, you have people who are showing like Arbites models and having people go, what are those? And then you have other people who are, you know, crabbing about novels that are written for 12-year-olds. Yeah. And it started me to thinking about, you know, kind of what's been going on with the aging of the community and the aging of the game. And what does that mean? And so it's kind of the, you know, the graying of Warhammer. You hear people talk about, oh, I've been playing since Rogue Trader. Right. Well, that's, you know, 1987 is when Rogue Trader came out. And so if you started Rogue Trader when you were 10 years old, you're 43 now. Yeah. Right?
Yep.
So, I mean, and if you started later than 10 years old, then you're well over 43. So it's just, it's interesting because people think of it when you talk to people about, oh yeah, I play this game where you build and paint miniatures and you play war games with them. People go, oh, it's a kid's game.
Actually, the first question I get is, oh, well, do you play that online?
Oh,
right.
Really?
Like they conceptually, people now they immediately go to that.
Right.
Is it a video game? I don't understand. And I'm like, no, it's on a table.
Yeah.
And you move models.
Right. And when I first started playing it, you know, a lot of people saw it as a kid's game.
Yeah.
Oh, this is for kids. And
it's,
you know, you go into a games workshop and be mostly, you know, teenagers.
Yeah.
And preteens playing. And so, you know, it's just, what does it mean for the game to have been around for 33 plus years now? It's, you know, started in 87. And what does that mean for the people who've been playing it for a long time and different ages of people getting into it? You know, because if I'm, you know, in my 50s and I convince somebody who's in my age cohort to get into it, they're going to be a new player in their late 40s, early 50s, right? As opposed to someone else who's a brand new player with his friend who's 14.
Yeah.
Who happened to walk into a GW store and get hooked with, you know, painting a free Space Marine. So I just think the whole topic of it and the way that the different age groups interact and then how GW has to deal with it, because, you know, they've got to figure out a way to mold this all into their business plan.
Stay relevant.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the idea. That's kind of what got me thinking about it.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that because a lot of the other members of the cast are younger than you and I.
Oh yeah. Well, all of you are younger than me.
I'm trying to help you out, old man.
I was going to say that's why you brought me in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because
I loved it when we
I'm much closer to this demographic, right?
I loved when we invited Dave. I said, "Hey, you want to be on this episode? Here's the concept." And Dave goes, "Oh, thanks for inviting me to the old man episode." But you know, when we talk about this, you know, I do find it interesting that a lot of the members of our podcast are younger than you and I, Adon.
Right.
I think Doug is second in line. I think he's slightly older than I am. And then, you know, I've just hit 50 this year.
Right.
And for people who are younger, who are listening to this show, I mean, like I'm talking like Josh and Jody are in their mid 30s.
Right.
I think I think Justin's late 30s. You said you think maybe he just turned 40. I don't think he's quite 40.
I don't think he's there yet. But I mean, look at when we went to England with Campbell.
Right. But my point there is, when I was 25, I felt like 35, 40. I'm like, oh, that's so far away.
Yeah.
Now I'm 50.
Well, it was.
It was maybe, but now I'm 50. But I don't feel 50. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't.
Right.
I'm still the same nerdy kid inside that loves this kind of thing, loves video games, loves comic books, all that stuff still applies. I think it's okay to be that older, younger kid inside.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting for this hobby where, I mean, when I was 25, 24, or whatever, I would never have thought about, I'm going to be hanging out with a bunch of guys in their late 40s.
Recording a podcast.
Right? I was like, that's not really my idea of a good time. But now, I wouldn't even bat an eye.
Yeah.
About that.
Yeah.
The age difference. So it's interesting once you get into the hobby and you start looking at it. And I think that, again, I think it's going to be an interesting progression as the years go by for Games Workshop, for all these tabletop companies, but particularly Games Workshop, because they're the granddaddy of in terms of being in it for so long. There's other games that have started since and died since, but
and come before, right?
Right. So, but that's the kind of the idea. And I mean, because Second Ed started in 1993. Right. So if you started then when you were 10, you're 37 years old.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and so and how many people actually start when they're 10? A lot of people start when they're a little bit older than that.
Yeah.
But I was playing Warcry with this kid who was in high school.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yep.
And so it's definitely something that the company has to really think about. How do we integrate all of this? How do we keep all these ends of the spectrum engaged? And it's not easy.
No, because, and I think, and we'll get into it later, but there's other challenges that are competing for that. So let's talk about, Don, you started playing 40K when?
My son was about 10 years old. So that would have been right around 2005. That was in fourth ed. And I was 42 at the time.
Yeah.
I started in my 40s.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was 36. I started a year after you.
Right.
At 4th edition. And Dave?
And I was 18, and it was 1925. No, just kidding. It was 1991 with Rogue Trader.
Yeah.
Rogue Trader. Yep.
Yeah. So you started right before second edition.
Yeah. Well, a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was always aware of this game as a teenager. I was aware of the game. There were times where I thought about getting into it and thought, I'm really into RPGs, or boy, the cost of that is prohibitive to me at this point. So it wasn't until I kind of hit my mid-30s that I was like, I have some cash I can spend on this game. And I remember
I didn't really know anything about it until my 30s.
I remember distinctly we bought the Battle for McCrag set, and I went in halves on it with Dave, our buddy Dave Noble. And we said, and I said to my wife, I'm thinking about getting into this since it's a bit of an investment. I go, if it turns out I don't like it, I can probably turn around and recoup half the cost of this stuff if I sell it. So it's really not that big of a deal, but we're going to give it a go. And a bunch of guys came over the day we had that set, and we had built everything, and we played through all the intro scenarios. And next thing you know, everybody, we were off to the races. Everybody was buying it. And
14 years later, look what we are.
Yeah, look where you are now. I never in my wildest imaginations thought we would be here. But behind me are 9 cases full of models.
Right.
And, huge game room. And
I was just looking at the bookshelf there. That's
all RPGs behind me. All there.
Just loads of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you actually have, is it 9 IKEA cases, right?
Yeah. Full. And the thing is, I have to add other shelves because I don't want to add more cases at this point. It's ridiculous.
Sure. Yep.
So
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about this, and Don, you were talking about how Games Workshop has to adopt, and how realistically any company getting into wargaming at this point has to adapt a bit, because there are so many things that compete for attention. And and I don't have it in the notes here, but one of the interesting things is we've talked about him on the show before, but Mason, who is my wife's friend's son, is 13 or 14 now. He got into the game, and people were very, very nice to donate, a bunch of Dark Angel stuff.
He's got 4,000 points of Dark Angels now.
That's so many, dude. Yes, and the thing that really appealed to Mason from the get-go, though, were the Tyranids. And so he had earned some money over the summer, and he was looking at spending this money on Tyranids, and his mom said, well, go talk to Carl and see what you should buy. And so we were kind of looking at these things, and I was talking with some friends about it, and Anthony basically said, look, I've got this huge amount of Tyranids still on sprue. I'm never going to assemble this stuff. He can just have it. And
wow.
So now he's got, and I kid you not, dude, he's got like 4,000 points of Tyranids.
Oh my gosh.
and he's at home assembling them in his room. Like, he's constantly messaging me, what do I equip this guy with? And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk a little bit about what you don't want to put on him. And so we're going through that whole thing. But it was interesting because the key gate for him was the cost of the game. And we've had, and people have had this discussion over whether this hobby is expensive or whether it's not expensive compared to other hobbies. I tend to, obviously, because I'm so invested in it, I feel like it's a good value for my money that I spend.
Yeah.
I'm not scuba diving. My dad scuba dives. Right. That's where he feels like he's getting good value. So it's really a personal kind of decision on whether you think it's expensive or not. But for a 13-year-old kid at this point,
oh yeah,
it's a pricey investment to get into.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely one factor that dissuades younger gamers from getting into it.
Definitely. And that's one of the things I think when you look at, and I know we were talking about adaptation later in the notes, but one of the things that I thought that GW did well to adapt to that is both the smaller size starter boxes. Yep. Like there's the one starter box. I think it only has like 6 models from each side in it, and the box itself becomes the terrain. First strike.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they have the models, the boxes that have push fit models.
Yeah.
And they have games like Kill Team and Warcry and these other, as Jervis calls them, kitchen table games.
Yeah.
On the 22 by 33 or 22 by 30 boards.
Yeah.
And it allows people to get in and running and playing for $75.
So does Kill Team, right? Kill Team.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so much faster than back in the day when you were playing Rogue Trader.
Right.
Yep. Definitely. It's one of those things where when you're talking about the stuff they're competing with, you can very quickly, maybe not very quickly, download a computer game.
Yeah.
And start playing, and at the end of the evening, you'll have had a gaming experience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right.
Whereas if you're not looking at Kill Team or Warcry and you're looking at building an army, it's going to take a little bit longer.
It's that instant gratification piece.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people, they want that. They want that quick hit right now.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait. I want to play now.
Yeah. And you can see it. I can see it in the way my kid goes through Instagram, right?
Yeah.
They zip through Instagram like this, like that, like this, like that. I'm like, did you even look at that? And
he just double tapping everything.
And things have gotten, but everything has gotten faster over the years.
Yeah.
And I know, Jesus, I didn't realize I'd sound so old when I said that, but
you didn't sound old to me.
Oh, thanks, man. But when you go back and you look at, go watch the original Star Wars, and you can see the scenes of like the attack on the Death Star.
Right.
And I remember seeing that at the time. Nobody'd seen anything like that. And you thought,
right,
holy smokes, I'm on the edge of my seat. What's
1977.
What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
Then by the time Return of the Jedi comes out and they're fighting against the new Death Star being built, you have hundreds of TIE fighters coming at the screen at one time. And this is a whole point.
Right.
Like if you go look, they talk about the special effects and how they did them. But even there, they said people were adapting, and because of video games, because of all this input, they're becoming used to seeing more and more coming at you faster. How
processing more faster. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
For sure. And so this game is not a coming at you faster with tons of stuff. This is a slow burn, type of experience.
Yeah.
And so when competing with that, video games and movies of that type, like I think it's a totally different type of stimuli that you're focusing on.
Well, even esports, right? I mean, you got people who they are watching other people play video games online. Yeah. Right. And there's no investment at all. You don't even have to know how to play. All
it
you gotta
doesn't
do is
even
watch.
have to be an e-sport. Like people are watching other people play video games. I've literally turned to my kid and said, well, we could just get you that game. No, that's okay. I just want to watch them play.
Yeah.
What?
I'm going to sound super old here. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. I don't get it either. But actually, you know what I was talking with Jody about this particular topic because Jody's daughter is the same age as Tucker. And, Jody brought up the fact that, well, what you are having though, is you're seeing somebody else do this. Other people are talking about it. You have a shared community experience around what this individual is doing.
Right.
And I found that was kind of an interesting point that he made. It was
there are whole subreddits about some of these content creators.
Oh, sure.
And what they're doing. Yeah.
Sure. And then I think also competing for younger gamers' attention are things that take less investment up front, things like Magic the Gathering, that kind of stuff, which is still a powerhouse in the gaming industry.
Yeah.
There's no prep other than building your deck, which you can take as long as you want building your deck or what.
Yeah, I mean, you can play sealed too.
Or you can play sealed games
or draft,
what have you. But I remember when Magic the Gathering came out, we were going to DungeonCon frequently up here in the Bay Area. And I remember people playing it in the hall. Like we were getting annoyed because we were tripping over people playing it on the floor. And we're like, this is really obnoxious. We've come here to play role-playing games. What are these young upstarts doing?
You've been old for a long time.
Yeah.
But I remember, because I remember in the early 90s when it first came out, a friend of mine, we'd go buy Magic packs at lunchtime and go sit down and play Magic.
Sure.
Because it was easy. Yeah.
Right. There's no I've bought this thing. Now I'm going to cut it off the sprue. Now I'm going to glue it together. Now,
we're watching Dave do down
as
there.
we're watching Dave cut knights off a sprue. I see it's a knight, Dave.
Yeah, it's a chaos knight. You can see the spiky bits.
It's the best kind of knight. So in looking at the things that get in the way of the hobby for a younger gamer like that, I started thinking about, well, what are solutions for this generation? Like, how does a company, or how do we as other players who want to get
as a community,
as a community, get people involved in that community experience and get people engaged in a hobby that doesn't have such an instant hit, a dopamine hit there? And I think as I was putting this down, I realized Games Workshop has kind of been dancing around or hitting on this for a while. And this is why they refer to it as the hobby and not, hey, you're going to play a game of Warhammer 40k. They really want to push everything associated with it as something enjoyable. Dave, you have a particular phrase around painting where you're saying, I'm trying to remember the phrase. It's like painting's not a chore.
Make your painting a habit, not a chore.
Right.
Still working on that.
Sometimes it takes time, but if you prefer chores, if you're big on doing chores,
I got some stuff around the house you can do for me. But I mean, to that point, I thought that was an interesting statement because when you can convince people that the enjoyment of this game, this hobby, is not just, I want my models on the table and I want to play against you, Adon.
Right.
But it's, no, you get to put these things together in any way you want within the scope of these rules, if you want to play with them or not, if you don't want to play with them,
right?
You get to paint them however you want, right? You get to pick the color schemes. You get to do these things, and it's not, as Dave said, a chore. Oh, I got these. Now I have to assemble them. No, I get to assemble them, and once people recognize, Mason, why don't you bring this stuff over and we'll sit around all day and assemble this stuff? It'll be super fun because we'll sit here and talk 40K while we assemble this stuff. That sounds way more enjoyable than, oh my God, look at this box of sprue I have to assemble.
Right.
I have to heat up the tails on these 30 termagants and bend the tails.
Didn't take that long, man. It worked great. And they looked fantastic.
They did.
And they're all piled up in my drawer. They're all green.
One of the things, just to touch on that, sort of whole idea about getting to spend the time on them and getting to do them the way that you want to. For me, a lot of this goes back to that expensive idea as well.
Yeah.
If you're just thinking, okay, I'm going to buy this so that I can slap it together and throw it on the table for a tournament in my local store so that I can stomp somebody's face, and then it'll sit in a box somewhere.
Yeah.
You're not assigning a value to it.
Yeah.
So any money that you pay to it is going to be too much, right?
That's a great point, actually.
Yeah.
But if you like, for me, I definitely know that it's not an expensive hobby. Don't get me wrong, I've spent a lot of money on it.
Sure.
But it's not expensive because I enjoy the assembly, I enjoy the painting and taking the time for all that, so I can create something that I can then spend additional time
pretending
with.
I mean, we talked about that many times. If you look at the cost of, going to the movie and having some popcorn and the total amount of time that takes and what you end up with when it's done, as opposed to spending that same amount of money on models and building and painting and playing, your time, your return on investment is a lot different in terms of the time you get to enjoy that stuff. But we've talked about that before, but I think that in terms of GW and their young audience, trying to bring in that young audience, I get to watch the local store manager when parents come in with little kids.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they talk about. They talk about, oh, this is really cool, and you can paint them however you want. If you look at the latest White Dwarf, they actually have a thing about creating your own chapter with the template, the painting template and everything. That used to be the Bolter and Chainsword thing. But it's exactly right. I mean,
But what's the
show it as an overall?
But what's the parents' initial reaction? They're like, "This is really cool. It's how much?"
Well, but no, they're good at saying, "Hey, you can do it for this much. Here's a box with 3 guys in it, and it's $10."
Right, and that's my point. It's all in the positioning of it, right?
Right.
Sure,
and they've done a good job of how they've been packaging stuff to be able to get people to kind of set that hook.
Yes, it is. It is $50 for this box. Or you can go next door and buy a video game for $50, $60 that your kid can play for a week, and cool. Yep. But once I've painted and assembled these, I have them for life. Like I can play with them as long as I want. So, when GW talks about the collection aspect, the assembly, the painting, the actual playing, then they wrap all that in Black Library books and Audible stuff now, which just makes it much easier. And soon video,
I think that's one of the things that we need to add in there is one of the things in terms of solutions for younger gamers and how they're bringing people in is Warhammer community, the videos, Twitch TV, now coming out with the animation stuff they're going to do. That's all going to help with bringing in that younger audience. Yeah, for sure.
I think that's going to help the younger audience connect really well with the lore, with the IP.
Yes,
because what we're talking about is the difference between active entertainment and passive entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
If I'm sitting there watching something that's coming into my face, be it animation or whatever, or if I'm there listening to a book on Audible, that's passive entertainment.
Right.
If I'm sitting here putting together a Chaos Night, I'm actively entertaining myself by doing this.
Yes,
right.
So I think the step that they've got to work out, or perhaps they're just expecting or hoping it'll happen through sort of by osmosis, is that transition between passively watching the cartoons on Saturday morning through to painting the toy soldiers on Sunday afternoon.
Well, I think they've actually seen that realize itself with the number of people that came into the hobby from Dawn of War.
Yeah, the video game.
Right? And Total Warhammer.
For sure.
And I think that they're really saying that there is a specific hook there, and that's why they're coming up with so many different types of media to bring people in. That's why they have no problem with licensing all of these iOS games.
Mm-hmm.
Because the more people who get hooked on the IP, the more likely they are to want to, it's that old Star Trek Troopers thing. Do you want to know more?
And what's interesting is one person's failed video game is another person's favorite flavor of video game that they've ever seen. I have known people who have told me, oh, this game was terrible. And other people have told me that same game, I love that game. It was so interesting and it opened doors for me. And speaking of the lore, I mean, when I was first playing this game, I had really very little concept of the lore, a little bit about the Space Marines, but it was so vast.
Right.
And it remains so, but there's easy ways to ease into it at this point. But I remember Steve talking about the Primarchs and all this stuff, and I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And I've been playing this game for 4 months now. And then, but as I started reading the Black Library stuff, I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. This is very interesting.
I think another thing that's been very helpful for getting younger people into this as compared to when my kids were young or when I was young, is back then, people kind of hid the fact that they did this, or they hid the fact that they were in D&D, or they hid the fact that, it wasn't cool.
Still do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some still do. And so I think that one of the things that has really helped over the last decade even is the kind of the normalization of nerds.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
I mean, whether it's...
I prefer geek. Thank you very much.
We won't go into the difference.
I'll tell you guys my theory on that later.
But I think that that has really, really helped, right? And obviously video games had a huge piece of that. But because of the
movies.
Yeah. And, I mean, look at the biggest movies of the last decade have all been comic book movies.
Sure.
Right.
And look at where they're unveiled. San Diego Comic-Con.
Right.
Comic-Con, right? Even movies that are not comic-based movies are being presented at Comic-Con because they know this audience will devour science fiction stuff, devour fantasy stuff, anything of that trope, right?
And so I think that the normalization of nerds has been way helpful.
Sure.
In this stuff, and you don't kind of like sneak into the GW store. You can saunter into the GW store.
Oh, I swagger in.
It's right.
Swag is the best way to go in.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying. I mean, that's way different than it was.
And then you stagger out with your arms full of stuff, right?
With them laughing because my credit
Jason's
card's
at the store. Yeah, you're going to walk out with a couple $100 worth of stuff.
Awesome.
But that and the explosion of social media.
Yeah.
Right. And the way that they've been able, and I think GW's done a very good job of getting more and more of the gaming stuff out into social media.
Yep. They've also just become super approachable, right?
Right. Yeah.
Whereas before, and we've said this before as well, they were, don't tell us what you want, we'll tell you what you want.
Right.
Now they're very much like, tell us what you want and come over here and see this. And
with YouTube and Twitch, where people were watching folks play video games, now they're watching people paint models, and they're like, "Oh, I want that model."
Yeah,
and that really helps. It helps bring in kind of that. I think it helps bring in certainly people who are younger than me, but I think it appeals to that demographic.
Yeah,
no, I think you're right. If you look at talk about the hobby hangout that they've been doing, the Fall Guys every day, and you've got Wade, who's an old veteran. And Nick and Peachy, who are kind of early 30s, maybe mid 30s, but have been doing it for a long time. And then you've got Ben, who's 25.
Yeah,
right.
There's a gamut right there.
Yeah, you've got it all there. When they've done some fantastic sort of introducing games like Warcry and some of the other games that they've done over recent years. Getting Becca Scott to do the playthroughs.
How to play video, right?
Yeah. helping younger potential hobbyists get into what they're talking about by being able to identify with the people who are on the screen.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting when you listen to Boxcast and Stormcast and they talk to some of the newer game designers and some of the newer model designers. They're all, not all, but a lot of them are very, very young.
Yep.
And so they're bringing that sensibility with them into the environment, and you get mechanics like Warcry, which are, they have echoes of 40K, but it's a significantly different
its own game
mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, really where this leads me to is the section I call grognards and gatekeeping, which is, are we our own worst enemies in some ways, in keeping this?
And by we, you mean the old guys.
Yeah. From expanding into a younger generation. I mean, look, if we don't help that younger generation get involved, the game will die out and the company won't sell as much stuff. And then, we'll all be looking at these models going, man, I wish they'd come out with 10th edition.
Right.
But that being the case, I mean, I think one of the things we have to recognize, and as you get older, this is something I've been thinking a lot about getting older lately.
Sorry if I added to that.
You did. It's kind of causing me some anxiety. But, I as I'm entering the twilight years of But no, in all seriousness, I have been thinking about getting older. I've been reading a lot about it as well. And one of the things as you get older, they always say, old people get stuck in their ways and they don't want to change. And
right.
What's interesting is as you're younger, your brain can just absorb information much easier. This is why it's much easier for kids to learn a second language, that kind of thing.
Right.
As you get older, your brain just cannot absorb that information like it used to. But what you have is you have the benefit of wisdom that you've learned over the years to make up for your lack of being able to adapt new concepts. So
but if you're like me, you don't have either one.
Well, that's then the third category is tragic. That's a whole show into itself. But
old people are done. Awesome.
So one of the things that I think we as older folks struggle with is that things change, right? And we have to be accommodating to those changes and understand that those things change. And I give a couple examples here. The game from 7th edition to 8th edition changed dramatically. It was such a shift from a detailed, let me give you rules for every possible thing that could happen, to more of an abstract, this is a game, not a simulation of a war. And for a lot of people who had played for a long time, they're dumbing down 40K. This is dumb. It's a kid's game now. They're making it too easy. Right. I tend to feel like they streamlined it and made it easier for me to understand.
Well, it made it easier to play too. I mean, if you look at 40K in say 4th and 5th edition, I saw that as a streamlining of games like Advanced Squad Leader, right, where you are even calculating how much water you're taking into the field, right, and what's your supply lines and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, on some level, 40K was already 5th edition, 4th edition, 3rd edition was already a streamlining of that kind of heavy duty, chit and board war game.
Sure. Yep. Dave, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, having played since Rogue Trader and seeing a lot of changes. The change between 2nd and 3rd was huge, but it occurred at a time when I was really passionately into 40K. I was like, this is great. This is the best thing. So like 1997, 3rd edition, fantastic. And every change after that through was essentially just a tweaking.
Yes,
right. Really. Almost everything was a tweaking. There were a couple of significant changes in some areas, but when it changed to 8th edition and somebody started talking to me about power levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went, That's dumb.
By
Literally,
the way,
I said
my favorite way to play.
I almost spit out my coffee.
I have only ever played games of 8th edition using power levels.
Oh, that's funny.
That's awesome.
I have not added up a single point,
And it's liberating.
40K since the beginning. And it's like, woo!
It's liberating.
Yeah.
You're like, oh,
It is.
this is great. And
It
if
is.
you
It's
want
awesome.
to do all the points, okay, you can do all the points
I
too.
can totally do it.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That actually gets back to the thing we were talking about before, is making it more accessible to a younger, I want to play now crowd.
For sure.
Right?
And,
That's
and
true.
also, it's for people who are going through that process of developing their strategic minds, the tactical minds, the technical thinking, or the strategic thinking. They can dig down into those points values.
Yeah.
Right.
And they can really hone their army to fit right up against that 2,000 point limit or the 1,500 point limit,
For
or whatever
sure.
they're playing.
Right.
Whereas, I don't need to do that anymore.
Right.
because I'm not going to be thinking strategically or tactically. I'm just going to pick these 5 knights off the wall and go and play with them.
Yeah. Throw some dice and drink some beer. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
So I mean, I just another couple examples I threw out here were that models have changed in terms of being more monopose recently than
And easier to assemble.
Like there's a give and take there, right? A lot of people complain, oh well, they're all monopose and they all look the same. And I'll be honest, like when I mix those in with a bunch of other models, or maybe I change a little bit on, like when you're playing the game, I tend to not notice that after a while. Like you really kind of, it all blends in.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to, as the person who's been playing 40K the longest in this conversation,
Yeah,
and
for
back
sure.
to the times when it was just, there were no plastic miniatures, it was all metal. And if you wanted something to look different, you had to get out your clippers and your razor saw and cut it up, and you made good looking models that were different. They were unique to you, and that was converting.
Right.
And the multi-part plastics came along. It was like, well, this is so much easier.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about like hacking things apart anymore. I can just put things in a different pose. But as we've moved more towards that, the monopose kind of thing, it's like we just need to be able to do something to remind people that you can go back and cut those apart.
Yeah, much easier.
Well, and that's why I think it's been really
Much
cool.
easier. Exactly.
I think it's been really cool to see that in White Dwarf and in some of the videos that the Warhammer community has done, and some of the articles where they show some really heavy duty converting of the newer models.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not only
people are
that,
like,
there's Facebook groups around converting models that you can get ideas from and that kind of thing, and ask questions. It's incredible.
so it's still out there for sure.
Yeah. And then I think Games Workshop's attitude has changed. And this has been something that, it was originally a company of gamers by gamers about making games. The company goes public. It now becomes a company about making money. And that's the reality. You have shareholders, you got to make money. That's who you're working for. But you've seen the company go through a transition of, fun guys who are making a game that's fun to a business, to a really kind of old style business of, as I said, don't tell us what you want, we'll tell you. We're Games Workshop. We don't interact with you. To new leadership that has now changed it into, hey, we're customer friendly and we want you to be involved, and we're going to do these surveys, and we're going to do Twitch and et cetera. And still, I find some people hold on to this resentment against Games Workshop for their quote unquote treatment of customers in, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th edition, where I'm like, but it's a different group of people now. Like the entire management team is different. Yeah. You can see the difference. And they're like, oh, but they feel like at any moment Games Workshop's going to jump out from the alley and mug them.
Yeah. They're going to take off the mask and go, oh, it's Kirby.
Oh, it really is all this time,
Another fun one is, as far as me being old, is I had that with Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a good example.
That was a huge Warhammer player. I had like over 1,000 painted Empire models.
Yeah.
Empire was my favorite thing. It blew up the old world, and there was no at the time, like immediately after, there was no real replacement for the Empire,
Right.
unless it was the Stormcast Eternals, who were kind of like everything I didn't want. I wanted my fantasy low fantasy.
Yeah.
Right.
And Age of Sigmar was now high fantasy. And it was like, well, there's all this new lore you can start learning. And it's like, well, I'd spent 30 years learning the old lore.
Sure.
Right.
And you took it all away from me. So I can understand a lot of the.
It's a completely reasonable response.
Oh, I didn't play Age of Sigmar at all in first edition. At all.
Right.
I was really mad.
See, I wasn't a Warhammer Fantasy player. So for me, I was like, this is an interesting point, because for me, it was like, oh, well, maybe now I'll get into fantasy.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because I think that it was very clear, and especially the last edition of fantasy, the rank and flank style of playing was not popular in terms of people buying it. And I mean, a lot of the players who were playing regularly were playing with stuff that they bought years ago. They weren't buying new stuff.
Right. Yeah. It had stagnated.
Yeah. And so they needed to do something to shake it up and get more people interested and get more people involved. And, that's what they did. And they had a little rocky start in first edition.
Sure.
But they admit that.
But honestly, I think no matter what they had done, they would have had a rocky start.
I agree.
Sure.
As rocky? As rocky as this? Maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah. But they decided to do it during a time when they weren't interacting with the community.
Yeah.
So it was there was an absence of engagement.
Yeah.
Right.
Had they done it now,
I think it'd be a different experience.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Experience.
Yeah. Well, I'd still get mad because I don't have my Bretonians, but yeah.
Well, that's fair.
And listen, I mean, now that I've begun to learn about the old world, I was like, oh man, I missed out on it. But maybe not. I mean, it sounds like they're going to bring some stuff back. So
yeah,
we'll see.
I think, I'm not sure. I'm sure that's coming up in our discussion, but that's a little part of a nostalgia thing that we can touch on.
Yeah, we'll touch on that.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
but
yeah, let's wait till we get to that part. But so I think the other thing is we have to accept that things are going to change. Like that's difficult as you get older. It is difficult to accept that things change, especially when you've invested in things so heavily. But not only do we need to be accepting of new players, we also need to help guide them and shepherd them into the game. One of the things recently, there was a video that went around about these guys who blew $4,000 or $10,000 or whatever they spent on 40K. They had not played it before. They went out and bought all this stuff. They did a bunch of research, bought all this stuff. They were going to assemble it, paint it, play it. They built a table and all this stuff for it. And I watched the video, and it was fascinating to see them approach it. But it was also, and we talked about this in the narrative play, extreme narrative episode. I was very frustrated watching it, as their focus was, I need to build this list so that I can go play in this tournament and win. Like, my objective here is to play the game to win. And they had pulled out like the Psychic Awakening book, and they're like, I only needed these 4 pages from this book, and I had to pay this amount for the book. I'm like, you just ignored 30 pages of lore in that book.
Right.
Because all you wanted was those rules. And I get it. Everybody plays their own way. But I think regardless of that, we need to help shepherd people into the hobby in the way that they want to engage with it. Like, I think throwing out options of when Mason asks me, well, what weapons should I put on this guy? I said, well, what is it you're looking to achieve? Right? Like, right. What is it you want to do? I'm not going to tell you this is a bad weapon, this is a good weapon. I will tell you, well, you probably don't want to overload those guys with a bunch of biomorphs because it's going to be too expensive, and then you could play with other stuff too.
Right?
Yeah. But what is it you're looking to do here? Right? Because I'll tell you, if you're going to play against me, I don't really care how you equip that guy. Like, tell me it's this weapon, sure, But if you want to go to a tournament, or you want to go to this store and play somebody who you don't know, now you're going to restrict yourself a little bit on what you want to do.
And that's exactly right. I mean, we would get new people coming in and say, so what game are you coming from?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Right. So if somebody was coming from, say, Magic the Gathering, where the entire thing is optimizing your deck and making sure you're not, mana poor, and you understand how to resolve everything
To
and
beat your opponent.
Right. You want to beat your opponent. That's the whole goal. They have, professional players.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to approach it with that person a little different.
Is that what you're coming here to do?
Right. Then somebody who comes in and says, oh yeah, I was playing Dawn of War and I really liked the idea of what this universe was about. And I started reading more about it and I heard about the Primarchs. And I heard about this, that, and that. It's like, okay, I'm going to approach it with that person a lot differently.
Or myself. I come from a role-playing background. I've always had interest in this.
Right.
I remember one of these games I was playing with Jason many years ago where we were talking about going down the side of this cliff and he's like, well, I don't know if I can move down this. And I'm like, I go, just roll a die. Let's see. And he's like, no, I want to find the rules for it. And I'm like, oh, there's a concept I hadn't considered. Because I'd been role playing for so long. I was just like, hey, just wing it. Go for it. Do whatever you got to do, man.
What you're saying sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Sure, you can climb down that cliff.
Yeah, go for
it. Roll a fate die. If you get a success, you can do it.
There you go. So I think the thing I want to encourage people to do is not force people into playing the hobby your way, right? Like, understand that the hobby is the hobby. There's a whole plethora of ways to play this game. And by the way, competitive play is the last type of play mentioned in the rule book, right? There's open play, and it kind of ramps up to it, right? It makes sense. Right. Open play is very, very easy to play. Narrative play is a little more flexible in the rules, although I would argue more difficult to play. And then narrative play, which is like, you want to go play tournaments, this kind of
match play. Yep.
Yeah, match play, sorry. Yeah. And so, again, I love your idea, Don, of, what is it you're looking for? What game did you come from? So I can get a sense of why you're interested in this, or why are you interested in this game? Yep. Well, I really want to go to these tournaments. Okay.
One little sort of catchphrase sort of thing that I'd like to throw out here as well is something that we used to talk about in the US promotions studio, GW promotions studio, when I worked there, is my hobby, your hobby, the hobby.
And how would they quantify that?
So the idea there is that the way that I approach it, the way that I do my modeling or my painting or my gaming is my hobby.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have that focus. They're the things that I enjoy doing that make it my hobby. You have the things that you enjoy doing about assembling, painting, gaming, talking about your gaming and whatever, and that's your hobby. In GW, we were promoting the hobby.
The 50,000 foot view.
Yeah. So it's here. It's all the things. So when we
I like this.
Sort of developed promotional ideas, we had to think, okay, is this at this time, are we promoting it as at the hobby level?
Right.
Or have I just had a personal hobby idea that might work well in stores?
Right.
But not necessarily countrywide. It might be. It might not work globally.
Yeah. It might be if it's something that's like Halloween focused, that's going to work really well in America.
Right.
Exactly. It's like something like Thanksgiving, for example.
Right.
Thanksgiving plays in the US and Canada, but nowhere else.
Until you just said that never freaking occurred to me.
Right.
Really?
That never occurred to me because Thanksgiving is often promoted from Games Workshop's website and this kind of thing. It just never occurred to me that of course England doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving.
It's a North America thing. Yep.
Yep.
Wait till our 4th of July bomb fest.
Oh my God. But it's an understanding, and it goes the same with communities around the place. It's understanding is the way you're behaving something that's focused on a community thing that's hot at the moment, like a local community thing, or are you being able to be open and accept or encourage any type of hobby activity?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like last fall, they had a big ITC mission campaign, I guess you call it. And basically what it was people practicing for LVO.
Right.
Okay.
Or Adepticon. And so all the games were ITC, and every week you were playing a different ITC mission.
Interesting.
Right. And so people could practice, and that was the thing at the local store. That's what everybody was interested in doing. So that's what it was. Now, does that include everybody? No. But as Dave was saying, that's what played locally.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, and then somebody says, well, let's do a beginner league. It's only 1,000 points. Okay. And then you had some of the LVO guys just tailored down their list from 2,000 to 1,000 and, beat the baby harp seals. And so you had to kind of talk to them about, no. This is a beginner league.
Yeah.
We're trying to shepherd new people in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so it's all about, well, in my mind, it's all about expectations and making sure that everybody is aware of what is expected.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, you can have all sorts of different events and activities. Just it's like you're talking about the beginner leagues. You can have different levels and painting competitions.
Yeah.
That all celebrate different aspects of the hobby.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And if you're trying to encourage a particular approach in a store, you might have a couple of those events.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But,
and that really kind of goes to like what are some ideas for getting new blood into the hobby? And one of the things that I've kind of committed to doing once it reopens is this Los Gatos Warhammer store, which experienced a fire, Dave,
right.
And is shut down. I'm hoping it reopens at this point. They still have inventory I bought, so I'm kind of waiting on it.
I see.
Yeah, one's a Sister of Battle, and then a Squad for Warcry. But there was a time where Mason wanted to go there and play, and I was like, okay, hold on, like, how about you come over here and let's set aside some time to play, because I didn't want to send him in there, a 13-year-old kid, and get curb stomped by some mid 20-year-old, who's looking for this baby seal to beat up, right?
Right. Or he's practicing for a tournament.
It would totally dissuade him from the game, and
right.
maybe he'd have a bad experience. I was very concerned about him going there and having a bad experience, and his mom and I were talking about this. And so I was like, you know what that store could use is a younger group, like 15 and younger. You come in and I would help supervise that day and make sure people are having a good time and explaining the rules and et cetera. So I think volunteering to run events for younger people and kind of advertising those through your local game stores would be a really great way to bring new people into the hobby too.
Yeah. Endgame used to do a thing on Friday nights. It was called Young Generals. And it was the same thing. There was an age limit, and parents could come and they pay, I think it was like $5 or something. Mm-hmm. And they drop their kid there for 2 hours or 3 hours. And then the staff at the store would run them through different aspects of a hobby, whether it's building or painting or playing. What's it mean to be a good sports, a good sport? What does it mean to have all the etiquette you need to have an effective social contract with the game? And we ended up with a lot of people in our gaming community who came up through that.
Oh, that's interesting.
That system.
Yeah.
And, for parents, they could go out and have dinner, right? Their kids
for $5 for
playing
babysitting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Done.
Right. So
that was the Academy.
Yeah.
Program.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
It's very similar.
And now Games Workshop is actually for schools and school clubs that are setting stuff up. They're sending out material. Jody and Matt are both teachers that started up a wargaming school, wargaming club at their high school, and GW provided them some stuff, and these kids have super gotten into it. Like it's amazing,
And see, and when I was in high school, a teacher would never have been involved in something like that.
We had a Dungeons and Dragons club.
Did you?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But to your point earlier, Don, like some kids did not want to be associated or seen as being involved in that. I had a very close friend of mine that was like, I don't want people knowing I'm playing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I truly think you become an adult once you stop really caring about what other people think about what
your hobby,
your personal life. Right.
Yeah.
look, what I choose to do. And but there's people out there right now, I've met some of them that are like, I can't admit to playing this game in my industry. I will be ostracized as a result of it. And to me, conceptually, I'm in a bubble of the Bay Area. I have Warhammer stuff out on my desk at work sometimes.
But I think it goes back to
me too.
Oh, yeah, but your wife comes over and she's like, "What is this stuff?"
Well, let me tell you about Warhammer. For the 57th time.
This goes back to the normalization of nerds, though, too, because
Agreed.
Right now, something you didn't see before, you're seeing, guys deployed in Afghanistan playing Warhammer in their barracks.
Yeah.
Right.
Using rocks.
And right. You never would have seen that, 20 years ago. And so a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's okay. I
will tell you, I got a lot of Dungeons and Dragons played when I was in the Army, but
oh, sure. Yeah.
I got to my unit because I don't know if I've told this story on the show, but I got to my unit, which was at this place in Belgium called SHAPE, Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe. All the new privates arrived. I had all my, our bags there. We were lined up in the hall. The sergeants came down and decided, who they were going to pick for their squads. This sergeant comes in and he says, whose D&D books are these? Whose Dungeons and Dragons books are these? Because that was one of the things I had brought over. And they were sitting on my bag. I go, they're mine, Sergeant. And he goes, all right, you're coming with me. And he ran our D&D game for for months.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
So, I think, encouraging younger kids to get in the hobby and providing that support that they need for it can be hugely rewarding. And it really does help grow the hobby. And then again, I feel like stop being embarrassed about the hobby. Just share it widely. I have such a display situation here. When we have parties at the house and my wife's friends come over, who don't know me or whatever, and then my wife goes, "Oh, well, let me show you Carl's silly room," and then they come out here and they're like, "What is all this stuff?" And then they want to know about it. They genuinely want to know about it. And I'm like, well, how deep do you really want to go here? Because I'll talk to you about this forever. I run this podcast, and then my wife will be like, oh yeah, he runs a podcast. You should hear about this. But I've gotten multiple people in the hobby as a result of that. So,
yeah.
All right, let's do this. We've gone on for a while. Let's take a short break. We're going to come back and we're going to continue to talk about this topic just a little bit. All right, and we're back, and we're going to continue our discussion around the graying of Warhammer 40k.
Because we're old and we just ramble. That's kind of how it works.
Remember when?
So, Don, you kind of started this section here, which was really around nostalgia.
Yes. So and I titled it "Undeserved Nostalgia." I mean, I think that one of the things that the company has to deal with regards to the graying of the community is that oldsters tend to, fondly remember things that just really aren't that good anymore.
What are you saying?
Well, and I think one of the best examples to me is
I agree with you.
Gothic.
I agree with 100% with you on this one.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Battlefleet Gothic.
Yeah.
People talk about it lovingly and talk about it with tears in their eyes, all misty about it.
Best game I ever played.
Oh, I wish it would come back. It was so awesome.
I do wish it would come back.
Yes, I wish it would come back with a 21st century rule set.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I've played the old rule set, and I do not want that to come back.
No, it's pretty dated.
Yes.
Like conceptually wise and mechanics wise, like game design has grown from there a long ways. Yeah. And when you look at games like Firestorm Armada, right? Like that was the first time I saw a spaceship fleet combat game that I was like, oh, this is a really cool rule set. Like it's very smooth the way they've worked out a lot of this stuff.
Well, you can just look at board games. Board games is a multi-billion-dollar industry now. And if you look at the board games that were in the top 10 25 years ago or 30 years ago, and you look at the board games that are in the top 10 now, you can see the evolution of game design and mechanics.
Well, and this is why guys like Jody and Jeff and those guys can look at a game and say, and pick up the rules super quick, because they'll be like, oh, I see they've taken elements of this design philosophy, and this design. I'll bet this is how this is going to work. Yep, this is how this works.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. And so I think that sometimes the grognards tend to, grind these things about, oh, I want this game to come back and I want this game to come back. I mean, Inquisitor.
Yeah, that was my example. And I know Dave might take exception to this, but I'll be honest. I've read through those Inquisitor rules. They are not the best rule set in the world. Do they do what they set out to do? Sure. But I think there's better ways they have accomplished that. In my mind, you could use the combat stuff from a game like Dark Heresy or Death Watch and just supplant that with those, and it would work much smoother at this point. I want to go back to Battlefleet Gothic just for a second, Don, because it's such a great example on your part, I think. And we did an episode about Battlefleet Gothic where we went and played it, and to your point, it was Chris, Ross, and Justin who were like, we love Battlefleet Gothic. Like, it was the best game ever. We used to play it all the time, blah, blah. I said, okay, well, you guys got to be in on this episode, then show us how to play it. And then we went down to go play it, and they're like, I don't remember how to do this. I don't remember how to do that. And that speaks to the fact that the nostalgia weight there really carried that game for them. But then when you actually started getting into it, we were like, oh, well, this is kind of clunky.
Well, I'm going to make a suggestion here as to what the nostalgia was about. It was not about the mechanics of the game.
Agreed.
itself. It was the enjoyment they had as friends playing together. They could have been playing like Snap.
Right.
100%.
Right.
Uno.
Right.
They had such a great time playing together, and like no doubt there was a lot of like shit talking going back and forth.
Yeah.
And that's what they're remembering.
And to your point,
but the point is that it ends up being a call for those games to come back, and you're exactly right. It's not about the actual game; it's about the fun they had while they were doing it.
Exactly to my point about MDF terrain, right?
Sure. Yeah.
My experience with MDF terrain so far has been terrible. And look how that has colored my perception of what MDF terrain is. Meanwhile, you're like, I love MDF terrain. It's super easy to assemble and you get these great results from it. And I've seen people get good results from it. So, maybe in my limited experience, that's, but now in my head, I had that fixated that, MDF terrain's terrible.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Not necessarily true.
But then how much is too much in terms of the nostalgia, and how much does Game Workshop actually cater to that?
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because they brought back Necromunda.
Yep.
Right. And that gets people saying, oh, we'll bring back Mordheim. Right.
Yep.
They bring back Kill Team.
Mm-hmm.
They retool Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it gets to for me, and I had this listed later in the rules, but I think it fits well here. So Kill Team, Necromunda, Apocalypse, Horus Heresy, Aeronautica Imperialis, Titanicus.
Uh-huh.
Not to mention all the stuff on the Fantasy Age of Sigmar side.
Warcry, Age of Sigmar.
Right. I mean, there's all these ones on the other side.
Yep.
And, at what point is it too much? I don't work for a living and I can't play all the games, and I want to.
Yeah.
Right.
I think going back to the nostalgia point, in the as far as it relates to this, in the mid 90s or early mid 90s when these games started to appear, so Games Workshop would release one of these games in sort of September time, so getting ready in the build up to Christmas.
Right.
And I remember 94 95 was Necromunda release, and I'm pretty sure it was 95 Necromunda release, and that was the new thing, and there hadn't been a new thing for a year,
Right.
and there wasn't going to be another new thing for another year,
Right.
so you could focus on Necromunda and play the hell out of Necromunda
for a year.
Yeah,
at least.
Like the next, at least a year. Many people, that's all they've played since then.
Yeah.
Right.
But then the next, like the year before, 2 years before that was Blood Bowl. Blood Bowl third edition was launched. And I know I played the hell out of Blood Bowl.
Yeah.
But once I started playing the hell out of Necromunda, I wasn't playing Blood Bowl as well.
Right.
Because there were no Blood Bowl releases.
That's interesting.
It was Necromunda releases now for the next year.
Right. And the way that things have been, there's so many things coming out quickly, and then they're trying to stay up with all the different systems. You look at White Dwarf and you look at all the different sections in White Dwarf trying to keep up with all these different games. And you still get people.
I would argue they're succeeding in keeping up with those games.
And the older players are saying, oh, what about my Epic? What about my Gorka Morka? What about my Battlefleet Gothic? They want more and more and more of the old games. And how much is too much? You know?
Go for it.
I was going to say, I'll tell you how much is too much when they stop selling.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely fine that they can be releasing all of these things. This goes back to that, the idea of, that instant gratification.
Yeah.
That we were talking about at the beginning, where we're talking about the young players coming into the hobby wanting or being accustomed to instant gratification. I think we've definitely become used to that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think back and go, oh yeah, I played all of these games, and you list off 7 games, you played them, but you didn't play them all at the same time.
No,
you weren't super intensely into them all at the same time. But that's what you want. And you think you misremember that you were. And so I think that's why it's really tough. So I think it's okay for the community, and I think it's okay for Games Workshop to encourage people not to get into everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which they've started to say now.
Yeah, it's impossible.
On a couple of their podcasts, they talked about there's no way to do it all.
No.
Yeah. That's good.
But I do like the fact that there is a wide variety of things. So because what we find with this game and Infinity and War Machine, all these other games, they tend to be very, very regional. Right. You have a store in one place and then have another store 15 miles away, 20 miles away, and the games that they're playing and the way that they play them are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. You have one game where they're playing Warcry a couple times a week, and another store where they don't even stock it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it on some level, it's really good to have all these different games out there where people can basically salt it to taste, as long as they update the rule sets.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think you're exactly right. When you mentioned Gorka Morka, that was the one that tweaked for me. It was like, I don't know a lot of people who are super nostalgic for Gorka Morka. I think they love the idea at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's an element of it that can be brought back that would hook the nostalgia of people.
Right.
Tickle that nostalgia.
Sure. And some of those sales probably happen as a result of that nostalgia, without a doubt. Necromunda, also, it's been presented in an incredibly professional way.
Right.
But without a doubt, people got into Necromunda who had been into it before because of that nostalgia piece. Now, I would argue those rules have been updated and work pretty darn well. Like when you're playing that game, it is pretty smooth going at this point.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Yeah, I know, Don, you don't like it. Hey, listen, right after you complained about that, half my gang got wiped out in a skirmish, including my leader, a champion, and like two of my gangers dead. Like not even, like on a stupid skirmish. And meanwhile, my opponent also lost their leader and a couple of their gangers. So I'm wrecked at this point. And now my goal is just rebuild my gang. But the gameplay itself, I think, shows its growth and evolution from its initial things. But what are some examples of rules that have changed that probably as older players we would have resisted? And for me, I've listed a few. The removal of templates from the game was a huge issue with some folks. I still have a nostalgia piece for templates. Like I loved
Flamer templates for me.
Loved laying down Flamer templates over models.
Flamer templates. Yep.
Loved large blast templates. Even more so, loved the gigantic blast template in Apocalypse.
The pizza plate. Yeah.
Right. But the reality is, in terms of actually playing with those things, how many arguments do they cause? How much extra time does it take to roll?
Time.
Lay it over
that's
the thing.
my big call on that one as well.
Oh yeah, it's much easier now, and I think while it does miss a little bit of the physical aspect of it that I kind of like, I understand why that rule was changed. I think it's a solid one.
I mean, when I use the flamers, I still want to say, okay, yeah, I roll the dice, they all auto hit, but I still want to take that flamer template and go whoosh.
I know.
You can do that.
I do. Yeah.
People are going to look at you strangely.
You're like, what is that thing?
You can do it.
The random charge distance.
Yes.
Right.
Now, this was hugely controversial at the time. And as you say, Adon,
there's still some people who gripe about it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Of course.
Yes.
But I find this is a incredibly positive rule change because it creates so much drama in the game. And it also removes the kind of metagaming of, well, I know how far 6 inches is by looking at it because I work in construction. Like when you remove those kinds of things out of it, right? I feel like now we're on equal footing here.
Which goes along with pre-measuring.
Yeah, pre-measuring was my other one. And I admit, I was somebody like pre-measure everything. Oh, it's going to slow the game down so much. It's going to slow it down. So it totally speeds the game up.
Yeah, because people aren't standing there wondering, going back and forth. Is it 18 inches? Is it 16 inches? What is it? I don't know.
Holding their rule book sideways so they can kind of get a gauge for what 12 inches is.
Yeah.
Well, my cubit distance, the distance from the tip of my hand, like the middle finger to my elbow, is actually exactly 18 inches, which is a cubit.
So you just go,
So I can just go, I wonder how far that is, but put my elbow down. But I don't need to do that anymore.
You don't have to
Nobody
cheat
can call me
anymore,
for cheating
Dave. No wonder he won all those games. Yeah, I mean, it was one thing where I thought people were going to just constantly be measuring everything. But as it turns out, you really don't. You may measure a couple things very quickly, but it's so much faster. It's so much faster.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, but there's still, again, when that happened, there were experienced gamers who were saying, oh, this is just an excuse so that the youngsters can play.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're taking out, you're basically devaluing the experience of my experience.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's
definitely unfortunate.
And there was a grumbling that happened because of that from the experienced players.
Yeah. And then
I loved it.
I loved
it because I played with a guy who was in construction. He could look at it and go, yeah, that's 4.25 inches.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. I find that also the shift from, as we mentioned before, 7th to 8th edition turned it from a simulation of combat into an abstract game. And this was hard for people to grasp. It still is. Yeah. Hey, why can my vehicle shoot in any direction? Well, because the vehicle's moving. It didn't drive up there and stop and then say, I'm going to shoot. It's moving around and but that doesn't make any sense.
Spin around like a top as it's moving, Carl.
Why not? Why not?
Man, don't know what sci-fi world you're living in.
Yeah.
And then we talked earlier about the move from metal to plastics. And I remember getting in initially when I was looking at getting into the game. I'm like, they want how much? And the models are plastic because I was used to Dungeons and Dragons. All of the models were Reaper miniatures that were all metal, white metal at that time. And I was like, I would never pay that much for a plastic model. That sounds like a cheap out.
A board game.
Right. And now I'm like, it's not plastic? Forget that,
Although I have to say, I do love playing with my Sisters of Battle and having that heft of the metal model.
Yeah.
I do like the weight of it.
For me, it's usually the one model that's like, I have one metal sergeant that I, converted up from this basic metal model to this stuff. And then I'm moving all the models and then I go to pick him up and he's heavier and all of a sudden I drop him because I'm like, and scratch him up.
I think that might be why I've put almost all of my models over the last 10 10 years on resin bases,
Right.
like sculpted resin bases, so that they've got that heft to them. I'm not sure, maybe it is, but
I mean, I used to glue pennies or nickels into the bases too
to make it heavier. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So why do we as the old guard stick with this? If there are easier, more immediate, hobbies that you can get into, why do we continue to play this or do this? What is it for you, Dave?
For me, it's definitely it's a mix of things, but the strongest things that are in there are community.
Yeah.
Hanging out with people and having a shared, it's something that we can share, we can talk about and joke about and have fun with. It's the models themselves, it's the background, it's the concepts that are conveyed through the models. And I mean, for me, the gaming is the excuse to hang out with friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if I wasn't doing this, it would be I'd be having a very different life.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's one that I would like to be having.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, one of the things that I do think about, was it 3 years ago? Yeah, 3 years ago, I went and had my eyes checked.
Yeah.
And I was told, you have, I can't remember the particular type of it, but you have glaucoma.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good. So for me not to go blind, I need to be like essentially stoned 24/7 if I'm going to take the medical marijuana route.
Yeah.
Or I can have lasers shot into my eyes.
Yeah.
Which sounded particularly grimdark, so I went with that option.
Hey, let me tell you, it's not that bad.
Yeah, no, it was fine. But for me, particularly at that time, I was like, everything I do with this hobby is visual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I started, I'm going to use the word looking around.
Yeah.
At other things that the Games Workshop was doing to engage people, not just have it focused around like putting the models together and painting them up.
Yeah.
And thinking about what would happen if my eyesight did deteriorate to a point where I wasn't comfortable painting or I didn't get the same enjoyment out of it. How would I continue to enjoy my like Games Workshop hobby, my 40k hobby, my tabletop gaming hobby, that kind of thing? I was like, man, I might actually have to learn how to play.
I'm in the same boat lately. I definitely need to go into the eye doctor. I've been using like cheater reading glasses. I got my nearsightedness corrected by LASIK surgery just in time to lose my farsightedness. And so now I am having a harder and harder time working on miniatures and this kind of thing. And I'm noticing it. Like, so I do need to go in and get that checked. I'm kind of hoping the COVID thing's over and I can go do that. But I've bought like magnifying glasses and that kind of thing to use to kind of set that off for the time being. But yeah, I've had some of those exact same concerns. And I think you hit on a lot of the same ideas of why I stand to it. And I found this community to be incredibly welcoming, incredibly supportive. I mean, there's individual experiences here and there, but in general, this hobby and the community around it is so friendly and welcoming. Don is a perfect example of this where, we met because I played it at a tournament, and then I went up to that game store. I'd never been up there. I got invited up to that game store, and Don and I met and hit it off really well. And he's just so warm and welcoming, as was that whole group at the time.
Yeah.
And so I have found other hobbies I tried to get into. I had an absolute terrible experience with that.
Yeah.
But this, I think that's probably the key factor for me, and the fact that I've invested so much in it at this point, right? Like, I'm
interesting.
You're committed.
Yeah. I mean, I have participated in and still participated in a lot of different kinds of hobbies, whether it's motorcycling or target shooting or fencing or I played golf for a while. Talk about an expensive hobby. And a lot of what Dave's talking about, it's you get varying levels of that community, hang out with your friends, fun stuff, doing cycling and stuff like that. You're not it's not the same thing. You don't end
You're
up
an
with the same experience at
individual
the end of the day.
competing as an individual,
Right.
with your biking, right?
Yeah. Or even if you're just going on group rides.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the same kind of experience at all. You know, because you can't have 3 beers while you're rolling down the street.
That either. Yeah.
You can. It's frowned on in some.
Yeah, it's frowned on. Yeah, they don't particularly like it. But I think that's a great aspect of it. And I you know, it's again, what do people want to get out of it, right? What is it they're trying to do with it? Some folks aren't particularly social.
Yeah.
At all.
Right.
So for them, it's all about the assembly and the painting.
But you know what's interesting, Adon? Even those people who are not particularly social, this is an opportunity where you now have common ground to talk to somebody.
Oh, sure.
About something where
I'm gonna stick my hand up for that.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I have a great deal of sort of social anxiety just standing in a room where people are expecting you to go and talk to them.
Yeah.
Or to strike up like small talk. It's like, I don't want to do that.
I hate going to a party like this. Like if we got invited to a party at somebody's house and I don't know those people, incredibly stressful for me.
Yeah.
But if I found one guy in there was like, oh yeah, I'm into Warhammer 40k. Well, you and I have just become best buddies for the night. But
let's get talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So that's a great point, Adon.
Yeah, and I think I think that as you go along, you know, yes, there are you can get that common ground, but for some folks, they still don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's okay. Because as you know, my hobby, your hobby, the hobby.
I like that. That's a cool.
You know, your hobby might be sitting there, and I know people who one guy will build the models, the other guy will paint the models.
Right. Yep.
And one of those two doesn't even play.
Hey, right? Dave, I'll build them.
I like sending it off and have somebody build them and paint them, and then I can play with them.
Hey, that's your hobby, right?
Exactly.
That's my hobby. That's right.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. So, you know, there are some advantages to being an older gamer.
Yes.
And not all of them are listed here in our notes, but and one that's not listed, I'm going to throw out right away is typically you have access to more disposable income as an older gamer. Typically.
And you typically have way more models than anybody else.
Yes, this is very true. But Adon, you actually raised this point that you have right here. The 20-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah.
It came up when we were talking about narrative gaming, and that is that, you know, a 20-year-old geek, to use the Dave word, just doesn't have the same volume of stuff in their head from which to draw inspiration if you're going to be talking about things like narrative gaming, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not physically possible for them to have consumed the same amount of stuff in terms of the lore and the experiences of playing and those kinds of things that an experienced gamer could have to be able to bring to bear, whether it's a narrative campaign or whether it's
even a tournament
event you're trying to run, or, you know, and that's true. It's true in any profession, right? You know, you don't put a brand new 2-day cop writing with a 6-week cop, right? You want to put them with somebody who's been around for a while and actually knows, you know, what's going on. And it's the same kind of thing. You have to have, you have an advantage in being able to draw on that. And you just have to be careful that you don't end up stuck in your ways because you're,
I think
this is the way I do it.
That's the danger right there.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But and I mean, I think the other thing, and this is interesting because there's different phases here, is the time that you can spend on these kinds of things.
Yes.
You know, when you're younger, you tend to have a lot of time, but not the resources to spend on these kinds of things.
Right.
Then as you get older, you have the resources, but not necessarily the time, is the situation that I find myself in right now.
Right. Or when you have kids.
But then your kids maybe get older and are more self-sufficient or can move out or whatever, and that frees up a bunch of time. And then you kind of transcend that and you go into a Dawn level time where you retire and your whole life could be about gaming, except for your wife. But do you find, Adon, you have more time than ever for this kind of stuff?
Well, I find that I have more time to kind of do things that interest me.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so I end up doing a lot more things that interest me,
Yeah. Whether that's gaming or motorcycles or whatever.
Or whatever it happens to be. Yeah. And I think that, or, buying a lot of tech to be able to do a podcast that nobody listens to. I think that it's great. And you kind of wish, oh man, I wish I still had another 40 years to be able to do this.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm like,
yeah,
not to get all, weird,
maudlin,
but
right.
like, we've hit 50. I'm talking to my wife about, okay, it looks like we're going to have these kinds of funds. What is it we want to do with our remaining 25, 30 years that we're completely mobile and able to do stuff? What are the things we want to accomplish in that time? Because as I've said on the show many, many times, it's the only resource you can't get back, right?
Yeah.
I can go earn more money. I can, do other things, but I can never get time back. And so, really take that for what it's worth. It's
depending on how I ride my motorcycle, it could be even less.
Well, well, we hope you ride it carefully, Tom. So, let's go ahead and just move forward. And how does Games Workshop adapt? We've talked a little bit about that already. I don't think we need to kind of really beat that in, but they can make the game appealing for younger generations. We've talked about this as well around video games and continuing to press there, multimedia content, that kind of thing. And I think just ensuring the game is accessible, and we've talked about this before, but I think at some point they're going to have to embrace some kind of digital distribution of their rules. And we know that, everybody knows that. And I would be shocked if Games Workshop doesn't know that too.
Just buy out BattleScribe.
It's not that, I don't think that's the answer either. I think,
no, I know. I
think there's
just throwing it out there.
That might be a part of what they need, but they need a bunch of stuff. So
I like your idea though about supporting the plank holders though. What do they do going forward to support, the I've been playing since Rogue Trader crowd?
Yeah, for sure. Right.
And so Dave, what do you think?
With this one, again, I'm going to go back to when I worked for Games Workshop, and when we talk about these kind of things, we talk about what do we need to do to sort of keep the veterans of the hobby active. Sure. So even like 15, 20 years, we're talking about veterans, veteran gamers. We're talking about how do we bring in new gamers, and how do we transition people through that process?
Yeah.
How do we help them through that? The biggest thing the Games Workshop can do is continue to engage in a wide variety of different ways. Mm-hmm. So much of the early Games Workshop's mantra was there was an explicit and implicit invitation to create. Mm-hmm. So right from the very start, like, there are 1,000 Space Marine chapters. Here's 7 of them.
Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want with the other 993.
This is so and so who's made their own. You can do that too.
Yeah.
There was that when we talk about that dark period in the middle.
Yeah.
Where there was a lot of resentment, there was no engagement, that kind of thing, is when Games Workshop was dialing that right back. Now they've kind of worked out a way that they can invite people to engage, invite people to create, but not to in ways that don't impinge on the integrity of the intellectual property.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that the key thing that they're going to be able to do, that they're going to need to do to continue to keep us all around, is continue to engage with us on our level, wherever we might have to be during our journey. So it means that there's a lot of things that they need to do, but there's some things that they can just put on a cycle and repeat.
Yeah.
Because the new player of today will be the veteran of like 5, 10, 15 years from now.
That's true.
So moving that through and making sure that there are cool and engaging things that they can be doing is kind of the way to go.
Yeah, I think that they can also help that by actually, cherry picking some of the things that kind of speak to that nostalgia element, right? Kind of like what they did with Necromunda.
Yep. Titanicus.
Titanicus, redo Battlefleet Gothic, right?
They will.
Redo the rule set.
They will.
Even if it's just a one-off, right?
Right.
Like a box set kind of thing. Even if they don't support it as a full line, kind of like they tried to do with Dreadfleet, but they didn't really pull it off right. Dreadfleet actually was not a bad game to play.
Actually, I've heard it's incredible. I've heard it's super fun.
But they didn't pull it off correctly in kind of hitting that Man of War nostalgia tone like they could have. Because Man of War, that was another Games Workshop game that people have a nostalgic.
You want to talk about a nostalgia? Yeah. If I hear one more person talk about Man of War, I'm kidding.
I got this Man of War game that I can tell you about. Perfect. In 1994, it's probably April. No. I rolled a 6. He rolled a 7.
Yeah.
Anyway, keep going.
I love this idea that I guess Carl, you wrote this in there. The idea of a longevity award.
I did
longevity rewards.
Yeah. Oh, I did add that. Yeah. I mean, something that kind of,
I love that.
Yeah. That kind of rewards you for having been in the hobby for a long time. They used to have stuff, that kind of played to how much you bought. And yeah, that's one way of measuring it, but there might be other ways of measuring. I've been involved in this for this amount of time. And, I get benefits as a result of being a longtime customer and that kind of thing.
Right.
I think would be a really, really nice add-on too.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really wanted to try and implement, I guess, or get people thinking about when I was working for Games Workshop was because I love travel. The idea was basically you'd have a personal code, you'll have a membership card or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
You go to a store, into a Games Workshop store, or Warhammer store, and present your card. And the staff would scan it or whatever. It goes in and says, so-and-so is checked in at this store in a central database somewhere.
Yeah.
And then as you go to another store, you get checked in as well. And then when you've gone to 10 different stores,
they send you an award.
They send you an award, or there's an announcement on the Warhammer community page.
Every time I go
there's a lot of different ways you can do it now. But
every time I travel, I find the nearest Games Workshop just to pop in and see, hey, what are they doing that's maybe a little bit different?
Yep.
Not nothing. They're all the same.
Yeah.
But it is nice to talk to those people and see hey, what's going on in this area. Yeah. That's
absolutely.
a great idea.
And I like the idea. I mean, right now what they do for beginning gamers, they have these little things that look like baseball cards or magic cards.
Yeah.
And as you hit different achievements, you give you these little cards. You can put them in a little card binder that they give you.
Right.
And it would be great to have something similar that you can do for, here's your 5-year award.
Yeah.
Right. Or here's your award for running 15 events.
Yeah. That would be awesome.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Thanks for being a loyal customer at this particular store for 15.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, these are the kind of suggestions you can put in their annual survey too.
Absolutely.
So,
yes.
Right. So listen,
Absolutely.
what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back and we'll close out the show. All right, and we're back, and we're here to close out the show. You guys, I think I've kind of got all my thoughts out. My old brain is tired at the moment.
My old brain is tired too. Yeah,
Dave,
I need to take a nap, man.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah.
There is one thing that we didn't kind of mention. Well, again, it's a wacky anecdote, but I've been in over the last 11 years. I've been involved in a lot of historical gaming.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And covering historical conventions and stuff like that. And Historicon is one of the big conventions here on the East Coast.
I really want to go there. Yeah.
Yep. I think it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago. I was standing there and looking around, just people watching, observing the crowd and getting a sort of a feel for it, as I like to do. And I was like, man, this is really good to see. Over the last 6 years, a lot of people talking about how the hobby's getting older and the graying of the hobby, but it's really great to see a lot of younger guys here, the younger people walking around and that sort of thing. They all look like me. And then I was like, it's not everybody getting younger.
No.
Yeah.
Me getting older.
Yeah.
But
Well,
anyway, sorry.
No. I mean, I was used to play like in Flames of War tournaments and play Bolt Action at Adepticon and stuff and other historical games. And it's fun. It was fun when I was first starting to do that and having people say, "Hey, young man, would you move that unit for me?" Oh, I love this guy.
Young man.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Because the historical community does tend to be a little older.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. The
It's right there in the name.
Yeah.
Historical game.
You don't have to. I don't believe you should have actually been in the Revolutionary War to play ACW games. But yeah, whatever.
Damn.
Jeez.
But no, one thing I will say is that a lot of the folks who are involved in a lot of younger folks, so folks my age, who are involved in the HMGS, the Historical Miniatures Gaming Society over here, are actively working on ways to ensure that there are events, that there are games, that there are companies at their shows to appeal to the younger crowd.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that all of the things we've talked about tonight are also being discussed in the historical gaming community.
Right.
I'm sure in a number of other gaming communities as well. So I think it's cool. I think it's good to have these discussions.
Yeah.
All right. Yep.
Well, as you know, we have a Facebook group, which is incredibly popular. We have a Patreon, which you can look all the information up on that at theindependentcharacters.com. We love reviews on iTunes. Adon?
Sir.
What do you got going on?
Well, we got this little...
I know she got a nice new microphone there.
I do, right. For the mostly Age of Sigmar podcast, Lords and Heroes. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
I'll include
we're doing a pretty cool multi-game campaign thing we're going to be talking about. So it's
cool. Well, I'll make sure to include a link to that in our show notes as well.
Awesome.
So unless you guys got anything else to add, we'll go ahead and close out the show. So this is Carl.
This is Adon.
This is Dave.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon and remotely, where you are never too old to play games.
Where old age and treachery... I forgot the rest.
Wait, what? Sorry, I was taking a nap.
All right. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time. This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.